Have you ever picked up a carton of buttermilk at the grocery store, turned it around, and thought, wait a second, where's the butter? Because if it's called buttermilk, shouldn't there be at least some butter in it? That's the kind of name that feels like it's hiding something, right? Like buttermilk is pretending to be something rich and creamy, but in reality, it's just tangy milk. So today, we're diving into this oddly named dairy mystery. Why is it called buttermilk when there's literally no butter inside it? All the answers are coming right here on History of Simple Things. Let's start in the old days, before modern dairies and store-bought milk. People didn't just go to the grocery store for butter, they made it themselves at home. The process was simple, but labor-intensive. You'd start with fresh milk from a cow. If that milk sat for a while, the cream would naturally rise to the top. That's where the butterfat was. Housewives would skim off that cream and store it for a few days until they had enough to churn. But here's the thing. Without refrigeration, that cream didn't stay perfectly fresh. It would sit at room temperature and naturally ferment thanks to bacteria in the air. That fermentation made the cream a little sour, but also thicker and more flavorful. When they finally churned the cream to make butter, something interesting happened. The solid butter separated from the liquid left behind. And that leftover liquid? That was the original buttermilk. So yes, back then, buttermilk really was milk from butter. It was literally the liquid you got after making butter. That's where the name comes from. Now, this traditional buttermilk was very different from what we buy today. It was thin and slightly tangy, not rich and creamy. The fermentation gave it a bit of a sour kick, kind of like yogurt water. But people loved it. It was a common drink in rural areas. Farmers, especially in Europe and later in America, drank it chilled after a long day in the fields. It was refreshing, nourishing, and slightly fizzy because of the natural fermentation. Some even believed it was good for digestion. In some cultures, it wasn't just a drink. Buttermilk was used in soups, breads, and even as a skin remedy. Basically, it was the 1800s version of a health drink, like the old-time equivalent of kombucha or kefir today. But as technology advanced, so did our dairy products. By the early 20th century, most people stopped churning butter at home. Industrial creameries and pasteurized milk took over. And with that, the old-fashioned naturally fermented buttermilk started to disappear. But here's the thing. People still loved using buttermilk in recipes. Bakers knew that its tangy acidity made cakes fluffier, pancakes softer, and biscuits more tender. So, dairy producers came up with a clever solution. Instead of depending on leftover butter-making liquid, they started making cultured buttermilk. This modern version is created by adding specific bacteria to regular low-fat or skim milk, basically turning it into a fermented dairy product that tastes like the traditional kind. The bacteria, usually Lactococcus lactis or leuconostoc, ferment the milk sugars and give it that familiar tangy flavor and thicker texture. So when you buy buttermilk at the store today, it's actually cultured buttermilk, not the liquid from making butter. It's more like a cousin of yogurt than anything to do with actual butter. So that raises the question, if today's buttermilk isn't made from butter, why not just change the name? Why not call it something like soured milk or fermented milk? Well, partly because of tradition, and partly because of taste. For centuries, people had been using the word buttermilk. It was already woven into recipes, cookbooks, and everyday speech. Changing the name would have confused everyone. Imagine telling your grandma to use fermented milk for her pancakes. She'd probably look at you like you'd lost your mind. So, the name stuck. It became one of those linguistic fossils. an old word that outlived its literal meaning, much like how we still dial a phone number, even though phones don't have dials anymore. In other words, buttermilk stopped meaning milk with butter and started meaning that tangy milk you use for baking. What's really interesting is that buttermilk, or drinks like it, exists in so many cultures. In India, for example, there's chas, a spiced, savory buttermilk made with yogurt, water, and herbs. It's refreshing and cooling, especially in the heat. In the Middle East, there's Ayran and dew, also yogurt-based drinks that are tangy and slightly salty. In Scandinavian countries, people drink kulturmjölk or filmjölk, which are fermented milk similar to modern buttermilk. And in parts of Africa, there's Amasi, another fermented dairy drink enjoyed as a staple. So, while the name buttermilk might sound confusing in English, the concept of fermented milk has always been universal. It's one of those foods that arose naturally wherever humans kept animals for milk. It was a way to preserve dairy before refrigeration existed. Now, let's clear up a few common misconceptions. Buttermilk isn't just milk with butter melted into it. Nope, that wouldn't even taste good. It's not sweet or creamy like whole milk either. Instead, it's tangy, slightly thick, and has a bit of a bite to it. And here's another fun fact. Real buttermilk actually has less fat than regular milk. Remember, it used to be the liquid after butter was taken out. That means it was lower in fat to begin with. Even today, store-bought cultured buttermilk is usually made from low-fat milk. So, the name might sound rich, but the product itself is surprisingly light. It's kind of funny when you think about it. Something that started as an accident in old butter churns ended up becoming a staple in modern kitchens. Buttermilk went from being the leftover liquid no one asked for to the secret ingredient that makes food taste better. It's a small reminder that not everything valuable has to start out fancy. Sometimes the leftovers make the legacy. So, next time you grab a carton of buttermilk from the fridge or pour it into your pancake mix, you'll know. You're holding a little piece of culinary history. It may not have butter anymore, but it's still got centuries of culture, science, and tradition mixed in every drop. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our other bingeable channels. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.